Alright, this is Weapon X Reacts and we're back with another video, and this is going to be a review of The House That Jack Built, which is a film directed by Lars von Trier, and to me, this is honestly one of the most disturbing movies that I have ever seen in my life, as it does not hold back when it comes to showing you just what a serial killer might look like in our society. And it's all done in a way that is pretty realistic. And it's a movie that I totally recommend that you should go check out once in your life. But I will warn you that there are some scenes in this movie that can be extremely disturbing and hard to watch at the same time. But still, it's a great film that deserves a lot more attention, especially nowadays. And there will be a lot of spoilers in this review. I'm gonna break down the plot of this film. So, Jack, a psychopath and a serial killer, recounts a series of murders he has committed over a period of 12 years, which he considers to be a work of art. And if there was one thing I really liked about this film, is that the story is so simple, but so well written at the same time. And not just that, but it does such an amazing job when it comes to dealing with topics like mental illness and the dark side of human nature as a whole. And I thought some of the acting performances were really well done, especially from Matt Dillon as Jack, as he did such an amazing job playing this character. And to me, this is honestly one of the most realistic and terrifying depictions of a psychopath that I have ever seen in a film. And if there was one thing I really liked about Matt Dillon's performance, is that he does such a great job at portraying him as someone who has no sense of humanity. And when we first see him in the opening scene of the film, it starts off with him having a conversation with Verge about the crimes he has committed throughout his life. And to me, one of the most interesting things about this movie is that it's all told in non-chronological order, which I really like, by the way. And then we see a shot of him appearing as just a normal person who is seen driving in his van on an empty road, until he confronts a woman who asks if he can help her out with a broken car jack to her flat tire, which he does despite being completely uninterested with her situation. Before he drives her to the blacksmith, she has a conversation about how he looks like a serial killer and where he might store his victims in his truck after he kills him. But he immediately ignores it, and after the car jack breaks again after getting it fixed at the blacksmith, he tells her that he has better things to do with his time, but she tries to give him one more chance in order to go back into the shop. But as they get back into the car, she immediately starts to mock him, saying that he is just too weak to be a serial killer. And it all leads to him by grabbing the car jack and hitting her multiple times with it, and it ends up with her being bludgeoned to death. And to me, this was a perfect introduction into who he really is as a person. And not just that, but it sets up perfectly with the film you are going to see. And unlike most serial killers, this film does it in a way that is extremely realistic, as it shows you how a serial killer acts, how he looks like, and how he lives his life. And Matt Dillon's performance does such an amazing job at showing that. And as the film goes on, it's revealed that he suffers through severe cases of obsessive compulsive disorder. And you can really see that of where he tries to clean the blood out of Claire's apartment after he strangles her to death. And it nearly gets him caught by the police. And if you actually think about it for a bit, it's one of the main reasons on why he commits these murders in the first place, as it all comes naturally to him, as he can't control it. I also want to talk about his childhood for a bit, as it really adds a lot to his character in a way. So the film describes that he started off as a lonely boy who had no interest in playing with the other kids. But the most disturbing thing about this is all shown in a flashback of him trying to mutilate a duckling by chopping its legs off. And to me, this was honestly one of the most disturbing scenes that I have ever seen in a movie, as it shows just what kind of person he became as an adult, and the way in how he treats his victims throughout the film. And not just that, but it's also implied that he was raised in a very controlling environment. And you can really see that of where he talks about how his mother was a massive influence on his life, as she forced him into becoming an engineer, which he never wanted to be. And I thought the scenes of where he tries to fake human emotion in the mirror is a perfect example of just how soulless and empty he really is as a person. One of the most interesting things about him as a character is the way in how he views his crimes as nothing more but a work of art. And you can really see that of where it's revealed that his biggest dream was to become an architect. And not just that, but he talks about how he was obsessed with the negatives in photography when he was just 10 years old. And I thought the scenes of where he tries to document his killings by taking pictures of them is a perfect example of that, as he thinks that it reveals a dark truth about humanity. And I also want to talk about his motivation for a bit, as it's described that he is driven by a desire to build a house, and you can see through many scenes that he fails to do that, which he does near the end of the film. And the most disturbing thing about that scene is that the house that he built was actually the bodies of the people he killed. And it really says a lot about his mindset and why he tries to commit these murders in the first place. As to him, he thinks that they are a way for him to create his masterpiece. And if there was one thing I really liked about this movie is that it does such a great job at showing how pretentious he really is as a person. Because if you actually think about it for a bit, the main reason on why he commits these murders is not for the sake of art. He just kills people just for the sake of it. And that is what makes his character so fucking terrifying. If there was one thing I really liked about Matt Dillon's performance, is the way in how he brings so much depth and complexity into this character. And I even heard that his performance was heavily inspired by serial killers like Ted Bundy and Jack the Ripper, for example. And to me, it really shows just how good of an actor he can be, as he made Jack one of the most terrifying and disturbing villains in the history of cinema. And it's definitely up there with Christian Bale's performance in American Psycho. But the difference here is that this film is a lot more disturbing than American Psycho because it's actually a lot more shocking. And overall, Matt Dillon honestly made this film better than it already is with his performance, as he did such an amazing job at playing a character who is deeply complex and just so well written. And it really adds a lot to the fact that this film is just an absolute masterpiece that we just don't see from modern Hollywood anymore. I thought Bruno Ganz did a great job playing Verge. And the film portrays him as being an old man who guides Jack through the circles of hell. And if there was one thing I thought was really interesting about Verge's character, is the way in how he tries to be a voice of reason to Jack's pretentious and violent nature. And in the film, he even criticizes Jack's crimes for what they really are. And if there's one thing I really like about this movie is that it shows how different they are when it comes to their philosophies on life. As Jack thinks that he is the tiger in a world full of lambs. And overall, this was honestly one of Bruno Ganz's best performances, as he brought so much depth into the role. And I even heard that this character was heavily inspired by Virgil from Dante's Inferno. And the fact that this was one of the final films that he starred in before he passed away in 2019 really makes his performance hit much harder. But still, he fucking carried this film. And this goes the same way with Matt Dillon as Jack. And I totally recommend that you should go check out some of his other roles, for example, as he gave one of the greatest performances in the history of cinema. And it really shows just how good of an actor he can be. And to me, I think he's one of the best actors of all time. And this film and Downfall is a perfect example of that, as he proved that he can bring depth to his characters. And it's really sad that he died because he had a great career. And this film was a great tribute to that. I thought Lars von Trier's direction of the film was just so well done, as he did such a great job at telling a story about a serial killer who will do whatever it takes to create his own masterpiece, even if it means he has to take the lives of other people. And I even heard that this film was heavily inspired by Dante's Inferno, and while it may look pretentious at times, it really proves that Lars von Trier is just the best when it comes to directing films that are provocative and shocking. And that's just one thing I like about him as a director. It's the fact that he takes risks. And this movie is a perfect example of that. And to me, this is honestly one of the best films that Lars von Trier has ever directed. And while it's not as good as Antichrist, Melancholia, and Dogville, for example, it's still an amazing movie. And while it deals with very disturbing subject matter, it's a film that I totally recommend you should go watch. But I will warn you that this is going to be an experience you will never forget. The cinematography is honestly one of the main reasons on why this film is so fucking good, as it does such an amazing job at making every scene feel gritty but surrealistic at the same time. And not just that, but it fits perfectly with the film's themes and its story. And I even heard that this is the same cinematographer that worked with Lars von Trier in a lot in his films. And to me, I thought he did a great job with this film, as it really makes the film feel hauntingly beautiful but disgusting in a way. The hunting scene is honestly one of the most disturbing scenes that I have ever seen in a film, as it's a great example of just how much of a psychopath Jack really is in this movie. And it starts off with him and a woman going on a hunting trip with two boys. And while setting up, he gives them a lecture on the ethical rules of hunting. And he describes how the hunter should kill the baby deer first to prevent the family from running off and the baby from dying from starvation. And then we see a shot of him going up a rifle tower, and he shows the kids in how to use a rifle, which immediately ends up with them being hunted down and killed right in front of their mother. And to me, one of the most disturbing scenes about this scene is the part of where he tries to mutilate their dead bodies, and he sets them up as props for a picnic. And then he tries to force the mother into spoon feeding them with pie, and he asks her what her favorite number was, and she says 12. And it immediately ends up with her getting shot in the head by Jack. And to me, the most disgusting thing about this film is what happens after the scene, because he takes one of the boys and he mutilates his face in a disgusting smile. And it really adds a lot to the fact that this film is just absolutely disturbing. And I do not understand why this film wasn't banned from movie theaters. And overall, this scene was just so hard to watch, as it fits perfectly with everything this film is about. And I even heard that this scene was one of the main reasons on why the house that Jack built is one of the most controversial and most disturbing movies that has ever been made. And I thought the supporting cast did a pretty good job in their roles, especially from Uma Thurman and Riley Crow, as they both give great performances, even if they weren't in the film that much. This is the rating that this film got on Rotten Tomatoes, so 59% from the critics and 65% from the audience. And I am going to read out the reviews right now. So for the first one, this is a serial killer that definitely pushes the envelope. Many of the killing scenes seem a little too real and feel a little like watching a sudden snuff film. For the second one, in this film, Lars von Trier takes another step towards the abyss, demonstrating his mastery of the story. For the third review, The House That Jack Built is both one of 2018's best films, and I can easily say a film that I'll likely never watch again. And that is something I most definitely agree with. And as I read these reviews, it's nice seeing a film like this getting the praise that it deserves. And I even heard that when this film first premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, it got a lot of backlash due to how disturbing it was at the time. And it even caused a lot of film critics to walk out of the movie, even if it got a 10-minute standing ovation from Lars von Trier. But still, it's a great example on why Lars von Trier is a great director. And not just that, but it has a lot of similarities to American Psycho in a way. I thought the soundtrack was just haunting and it fits perfectly with the tone of the film, and I'm gonna show you an example of it right now. I'm not gonna lie, I really like this film, but I will say this. I'm never watching this movie ever again because it's just that disturbing, and because unlike most Hollywood movies, this film actually feels realistic. And it really adds a lot to the fact that this film is just disgusting, but just so well made at the same time, because you could tell that this was made by a filmmaker who actually gave a shit about what he wanted to make, even if it led to it being a highly controversial film. And I will admit that this film is massively flawed because I thought some of the characters in this film were actually pretty forgettable and boring, despite being really well acted by the actors who played them. This film is dark, I'm not gonna lie. If you want to see what a monster really looks like, just watch this film. And also, I will tell you this. Don't expect this film to be a normal horror film, because it's not. It's an art house film. I will admit that it was a little bit long. This film is definitely up there with Sallow and Cannibal Holocaust and the Human Centipede as being one of the most disturbing films of all time. But yeah, this film is not disturbing just because. It's all done for a reason, because this is an accurate portrayal of a serial killer. And also, you know, one thing people need to understand about Lars von Trier is that he's a provocateur. Every film he makes is provocative and disturbing. That's literally the point. Just look at Antichrist, for example. This is Lars von Trier. This is what he's about. This is what he tries to do. And I really appreciate that from him, because there's not a lot of filmmakers that actually try anymore, because they're just recycling the same story over and over again. So it was a remake, prequel, sequel, whatever. This film is actually really original. And I really like that. And yeah, it's disturbing. But it's not like glorifying the violence. And that's the problem with most serial killer movies made today. Is that this film shows violence for what it really is. Well, movies try to fake it. I'm going to explain the ending of this film. So, after traveling down into hell, Jack and Verge hear the screams of dead victims, and then when Jack stares into the Elysium fields, he feels genuine emotion from it because as the film started off, it talked about how he always enjoyed seeing farmers and it's a really good scene. And after that, Jack starts to see a broken bridge leading towards heaven. But despite being warned by Verge that he will never survive, Jack tries to do everything he can to climb around the chasm. But it immediately ends up with him falling into the depths of hell. And to me, one of the most interesting things about this ending is how it ends with the lens changing into a negative. And overall, this was a perfect ending to a film like this, as it shows that he has finally received the punishment for everything that he's caused throughout his life, and it shows that he will never find a chance at redemption. And I really like that because if you actually watch this film, you actually start to like it that he's dying. And it's one of the main reasons on why this film is just an absolute masterpiece that will stick with you long after it's over.
Your house is a fine little house, Jack. Are you allowed to speak along the way? I was thinking there might be rules. Let me put it this way. Very few make it all the way without uttering a word. But to carry on, I really just don't believe you're going to tell me something I hadn't heard before.
That was maybe a mistake.
What was maybe a mistake?
Me getting in this car with you. You might as well be a serial killer. Sorry, but you do kind of look like one.
There's something so darkly funny about it too.
What if I take a look in the van, please, sir? I'd be a bad guy if I said no. Some people claim that the atrocities we commit in our fiction are those inner desires which we cannot commit in our controlled civilization. So they are expressed instead through our art. I don't agree. I believe heaven and hell are one and the same. The soul belongs to heaven and the body to hell. When I think about all the things I've done in my life without in any way resulting in punishment, the old cathedrals often have sublime artworks hidden away in the darkest corners for only God to see. The same goes for murder.
Matt Dillon is honestly one of the most underrated actors working in Hollywood today. He should have been nominated for this film. In conclusion, this was one of the hardest films I have ever had to review, as it does such an amazing job at going into the mental state of a serial killer, but in a way that feels realistic and raw. And while it is massively flawed at times, it's a lot better than the shit you get from modern Hollywood nowadays. As you could tell that this was made by a director who actually cared about the story he wanted to tell, and he did it perfectly. Also, anyway, that's all I got for today. Go away now and always remember, strike back like a weapon against wokeness.